Yeah.
Dr. Vijay Singh is there as a participant. Just make him co-host for some time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
देखा मैडम?
Yes, sir. Yes, madam.
आप सब आ गए हैं?
हाँ. So let me ask Himanshu sir to just welcome the gathering, the whole participants. Himanshu sir, I am requesting you to please welcome the.
Yes, madam. My pleasure.
Yes.
My pleasure and my duty as well. A very good afternoon to everyone. We welcome our guest speaker today on this session, Dr. Ganesh. A very good evening, sir.
Good evening, madam.
We welcome you on behalf of RJ College. We're eager to hear your session. May I request Rekha madam to kindly introduce, give a brief introduction of sirs to all of us. Rekha madam.
Yeah, thank you, Himanshu sir. Once again, on behalf of RJ College Autonomous Department of Physics, as well as the Indian Association of Physics Teachers, Mumbai Sub-Regional Council, again, I extend a warm welcome to each one of you. And I request my colleague, Dr. Kiran Kolvankar, to please introduce the guest speaker.
Good evening, sir.
Kiran.
Good evening, madam.
Dr. Kiran.
Welcome you on behalf of RJ College.
Yeah, it's really my pleasure to introduce my good friend, Professor Ganesh. He grew up in Chennai. He did his schooling and college in Chennai, and then he came to University of Pune for his MSc. That's where our trajectories merged. Then he went on to IPR to do his PhD. He finished it in '98 in plasma physics, and then he went to Korea. He was there for 2 years in postdoc. Then he went to Switzerland. He was there for 4 years in Lausanne, EPFL, Ecole Polytechnique Fédérale de Lausanne. Then he had another offer to go to Princeton, but then he decided to come back and join IPR as associate professor. Since then, he is working there. Though he has closed his bank account in Switzerland, he still continues his research in Switzerland with the collaboration with the Swiss group. He has also forged new collaboration in Princeton group, and he has published more than 100 papers till now, and he has completed 10 students have passed PhD, finished PhD under him. So I welcome Dr. Ganesh and request him to start the. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sir, please start.
Thank you very much. I'll share my screen.
Yes.
Thanks a lot, Rekha madam and Kiran, for a wonderful introduction and for this opportunity. I'm really very thankful, and it's also a little challenging, as all of you would know. So I'm going to share my screen. Just let me know if things are okay. Once you give a go ahead, I will start talking about what I would like to talk about. Just let me know if you're able to see the screen.
Yes. Yes, sir. Yes.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, very much. Yeah, it's very clear also.
Excellent. I hope the talk will be as clear as the screen.
Yes.
or a percentage of it. Okay. No. So I'm primarily targeting very young people who are in their BSc or BTech, and who are curious about life in general from the point of view of physics. I mean, starting from a bunch of atoms and molecules, how come we people who are able to feel ourselves, realize ourselves, take material inside and digest it and throw it out and be conscious about ourselves have emerged? If this question doesn't pop up to a mind, I don't know what can bother the person. This is such a shocking thing to start from atoms, who definitely doesn't have self-realizing feature, but then end up with humans and structures which are so complicated. So it's an amazing evolution in physics, and I think it's important that one should have the curiosity. So there is patterns everywhere in nature, the pattern in the general sense of the word. There are ordered structures everywhere in nature. So the question is, who designs these patterns? It's a very fundamental question, put very lightly. So I want to build on this, and I'm not sure in 1 hour where I'll go from here, but I would at least leave the young people with an impression that there's a lot of fun in doing physics problems and doing it well, especially problems where a large number of particles come into play. So those in the audience who are not directly connected to the physics areas, I will try, and I have tried my best to keep things in a very simple way, but then naturally I may get carried away once in a while. So you should sort of humor me around and let me continue with the discussions. Okay, so most of the resources here are from some of the papers I have shown here. And I gave a talk, which is a different version of this talk in a public lecture in Gandhinagar, sometime a year and a half ago. So the structure of the talk will go like this. So patterns or structures, they're everywhere. So sort of who designs them? How do these patterns come about? How do the structures come about? Is there a very simple-minded approach to the problem? Using some physics models, can you actually come with patterns which are self-sustaining, which we see in nature? And then I'll lead into this, and naturally the patterns come with starting with single particles. If you put in many particles together, statistically large number of particles, and then you do something to it, I'll demonstrate that, you get patterns. Okay. So not all of it, of course, that you see in nature is explainable today, but I'm sure the building blocks are already there. The foundations are already there. So I'll then end with my outlook. I'm not sure how the question answer session will go, but I leave it to the organizers. Just stop me if I have to at some point of time. Rekha Madam and Kiran. Okay, so patterns and structures everywhere. So who designed them is a question. So on the screen, you will see that a gentleman on the right-hand side, top right-hand side, is having a vada pav in Mumbai. The question is, who designed this vada pav? The answer is very simple. The man who is cooking it, he designed the vada pav in the sense of the word. Similarly, there is a young girl who is looking at a wonderstruck at a masala dosa, which is I think 10 or 15 feet long. Clearly, this structure cannot evolve out of itself. It looks like some designer is required to build the structure. So whenever you see a very incredible structure, out of the way structure, there is an intuition telling us that there has to be a designer behind it. It comes from our 60 years of average life of human beings, that whatever you see as superbly designed requires a creator, a designer behind it. And that is also true for the building that I'm showing here, which is the Institute for Plasma Research building, from where I'm sitting and talking to you all. It's a very pretty looking building designed by, in way back in the 86, 87s. And it's beautifully done. Naturally, it requires a designer, right? That's the common sense thinking. So let us go ahead one step ahead and see. Let's say, who designed these things now? For those we know the answers. We designed, human being designed them. But who designed these objects? See, you can see that in every picture on the top row, there is on the top row, there is on the left-hand side, there are two figures in each sub-figure. I'll come to what is the second figure in the end of the talk. So on the left-hand side of the top box, you will see a conch, a shell, a kind of thing, and then there is a pattern on the shell. Okay. Similarly, on the middle figure on the top, on the left-hand side, there is a pattern, and again on the top right figure on the left hand side, there is a pattern on the shell. Similarly, if you come to the bottom row, you'll see a fish, and around it there is an eye, and the eye near it there is a beautiful pattern. In fact, the whole fish has patterns on its surface. And then there's another fish, I don't know what's the name of the fish, but it definitely has a pattern, right? Next to each figure, there is also a similar figure next to it, which is slightly different in color and shade. I'll come to these figures in the end of the talk. I'll come back to this slide again. Okay. So these are very intricate patterns, beautifully done. So who is the designer? Naturally, man didn't do it because fish evolved much before men evolved. So we see such designs everywhere. So does it require a designer? The answer is no. In fact, nothing you require a designer. That's my premise I'm going to take, but that's far-fetched for very young people. But that's the idea. So let me go ahead. So how about this, which is sort of trying to sleep, and its beautiful spots on it.
Yeah, Professor Ganesh,
So-
can I interrupt you just?
Please.
Yeah. See, may I request you to go for a full screen on your screen, because
It's full screen. That's what I was asking
Because-
before. It's full screen here.
because we are able to see your slide, this thing also, and part of the slide is been cut off from the bottom.
Oh, okay. So this is what I asked at the beginning. So I'm on my screen. I'm full screen.
Okay.
So perhaps I should. I should actually go back and slide it back and forth. So are
There
you
are-
seeing?
Yeah,
Are
yeah.
you seeing
Yes.
this? Okay. So I should not go full screen. So let me
Yes.
go back in the beginning also. So it's exactly opposite of what we suspected.
Yeah.
Is I should not be going full screen. So
Okay.
let me see if I can remove the
Yes.
thumbnails
Yes.
and see if that
Now
helps.
I think it is okay. Yeah.
All right. So let me. I don't know how far you followed. Did you see? Did you hear these screens?
That was
Oh.
okay. Yeah, that was
So
okay.
slide number 4, slide number 5 was okay.
This you can
This is
show
slide-
for some time, because the bottom part
Sure.
is not visible.
All right. So thank you for interrupting in the right time and not at the end of the discussion.
No,
Thank you, recommend. So let's go ahead. So you can see, as I said, that so you're able to see now the full picture.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So the patterns that you see here, like I said, are on the surface of objects which are alive on the left side. Can you see my cursor by any chance? When I move?
Yes.
No.
Yes. Yes.
Oh,
Cursor is
great.
in.
Okay, that is fantastic. So please follow my cursor. So you can see that on the left side of every figure,
I think now
There
the
is-
upper part of the screen is slightly, slightly you can bring down the slide. Yeah. Yes. 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 That's okay.
okay. So on the top figure you can see, as I
Yes.
explained before,
Yes. Yes.
the figures indicate that I'm showing structures on the surface of conch, and on the lower figure, then I'm showing you structures that you normally see, patterns that you normally see on animals like fish and other structures. And next to each one of them, I'm showing you a pattern which I'll explain to you later. Okay. So let me try and go up the slide and let me know if you're able to see the slides. Are you able to see the slide?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. The same pattern happens on the structure of a leopard, for example. So these are all patterns. Let me go back. These are all patterns which are sort of stationary on the surface of the material. Okay, and you can also see patterns which are dynamic. Here is an example of the dynamic patterns. For example, if you go to a sea, or in movies, you must have seen huge number of fish which are moving in a big vortex, and this fish vortex extends to several kilometers, in some cases several hundreds of kilometers. So how does the first fish on one end know where to go when the other fish is so far away? How does it communicate? How does the structure sustain itself? This is a very intricate, very interesting question. Similarly, if you see the sky, whenever the birds are coming back, you will see that the birds flock in certain shape. And the structure of this flocking is several tens of kilometers or several hundreds of meters, depending on the size of the flock. So you can see that these birds form structures and patterns in a very unusual way, but they sustain it. You see it every day in life. Also, if you go to a market, which is not allowed nowadays, if you go to a Mumbai market or some place where a lot of human beings are there, then you'll see that as the crowd increases, automatically they form lanes. If you can see the cursor figure G on the screen, you'll see that there are lots of people packed into a tiny lane. The lane enforces certain dynamics, so that they enforces certain dynamics where automatically lanes are formed. This is also true for sheep which are moving in certain restricted area and various other animals. So these are dynamic patterns formed in a very interesting way. So my focus is, how are the static and dynamic patterns formed? If such complex patterns can form, then everything else can also form given enough time and physics understanding. And therefore, there is no designer required. It's a premise that I'm going to play around. Okay. So people may philosophically disagree with it, but that's okay. I mean, that's fair enough. So let me sort of go ahead. So can naturally formed patterns be understood using very simple physics models? And these patterns are nearly stationary. They're not going to sort of move around a bit. They're going to be, once formed, they're going to be nearly stationary. So that's what we'll address now. But before that, I have to introduce you to some aspects of physics problems where I'm going to talk about what is an equilibrium for a single particle, and what is the meaning of an equilibrium when you have many particles put together, because all these patterns and structures come out of many particles coming together. Okay, so I want to give you a glimpse of this. So just let me know if I can sort of go ahead with this discussion. So as many of you would know, way back in maybe 2,500 years ago or something, Aristotle described equilibrium as a most natural state. So what was his definition? He said heavenly objects, natural motion is a motion in circle with same speed for them, heavenly objects. And then he called for all of rest of the world, which is called as base objects, heavenly against base objects. Natural motion is rest. Then about 2,500 years or many years later, this gentleman called Galileo, he sort of changed it and said, no, natural motion is a uniform motion, state of rest or uniform motion. He generalized it and then brought in ideas of inertia, and most BSc students will probably know about it. I don't have to sort of explain that to them. Then, if it is for a single particle system, you know how to construct an equilibrium. You can sort of, you can remove the force, and whatever is left out is called an equilibrium, whenever you remove the force. Now, if you have many particles put together, rammed in, statistically large number of particles rammed in together, then describing this equilibrium is a little more involved. And most systems that we know are made up of such many particle systems. So, Clausius, way back in the 1830s and 40s, described an object called entropy, and he said that if you put a large number of particles together and don't disturb it afterwards, don't put more energy into it or anything, just let it be, but it is not an individual equilibrium of particles, then this system will tend to this object called entropy will tend to increase in time and try to attain a maximum value. On your screen, you will see there are two figures now. On the left, there is a picture of a gentleman called Boltzmann, and on the right, there is a cartoon which shows this object called entropy, which if you put a large number of particles in a box, say in a corner of the box, and let it evolve, these particles will eventually increase the entropy of the system. What is entropy? I don't know. Some object called entropy. And this increases in time, and eventually when the many-body system, when this large number of particles attain an equilibrium, this after that doesn't change in time. You can see in the graph on the right hand side, it increases very quickly in the beginning, entropy, and then it saturates beyond a point. So the time after which it saturates, the system has attained equilibrium. Now you have many particle equilibrium. So this is called a many body equilibrium, or a statistical equilibrium, or a statistical thermodynamical equilibrium, whatever name you want to call it. So how do you describe this system? The foundations of this idea were presented by Boltzmann, Clausius, and several other people. And there is a lot of history behind it, which itself is a separate talk, which I would love to give one of these days, but not today. Now you can clearly see that the entropy always increases, or it sort of remains constant. This is also called second law of thermodynamics. And most of the time entropy is described by a symbol called S of T, okay, in physics. So this entropy is either rapidly increasing or becoming slowly a constant, okay. And entropy is also considered as a measure of disorder of the system. So if you imagine a box, a transparent box, where you put all the particles in one corner of the box and you have given them enough energy and let it go, all these particles, what do? They will kick against each other and very rapidly try to fill the whole box. So it will be fully, the disorder of the system will keep increasing until the disorder is no more, it can increase further, it saturates. So you will get a uniformly distributed particles everywhere, and that is a time when there is a many particle equilibrium. This is what it is called, many particle equilibrium or thermodynamic equilibrium, when entropy doesn't change any further in time. So entropy is also a measure of disorder, okay. It's a very important idea. So if entropy increase is always taking to disorder, if you want to form patterns, what should you have? You should have events where it should lead to entropy decrease. Somehow, do we have subsystems is the question. Second law of thermodynamics says it is not possible. You cannot have situations where the entropy will increase and then decrease and then go up and increase. No, it's not allowed because it's monotonically increasing. That's what the law says. So we'll come back to that in a moment. So, Rekha madam, am I audible so far?
Yes, perfectly okay. Yeah.
Okay. So now I'm going to talk about, there are some statements here. I hope all of them are visible to you. These are some basic statements which I want all of you to sort of spend a minute with you all. So, you can see my mouse here. It says that the entropy S of T would increase in time continuously and would saturate. So if you want to write it mathematically, for people who know a little bit of calculus, it is written as ds by dt. It basically says for a small time delta t, what is the increase in delta S, the increase in entropy, which is called delta S. So it basically says whenever entropy keeps increasing in time, automatically ds dt will be greater than 0, but when it saturates in time, ds dt will become very close to 0. No more changes. That's how the equilibrium is defined. There's also the foundations of second law. But there is a very interesting curiosity here. Curiosity is, for those of you who have studied Newton's law, for example, a pendulum problem, then what happens in a pendulum? You write down an equation called m d square x by dt square is equal to f. In my equations, there is no m because I always work in unit mass. I normalize my equation, so I never have a memory to put m there. But there is an m there whose value is 1. So we have m d square x by dt square is some force. Right? We all know this. This is, I think, second law of Newton. Right? But if you, interestingly, if you change the sign of time, make time t to minus t prime, and write the same second law again, it looks exactly same. D square x by dt prime square is equal to f. So the Newton's law doesn't know whether time is going forwards or backwards. This is a very important input that one should take. At particle level, Newton's law doesn't recognize that there is a forward time and a backward time. So this suggests that at particle level you can go back and forth in time. It's identical. So the third bullet there says that, in other words, these dynamical equations are fully time reversible. In this language it is called time reversible. Then how is it that if you put many particles in an isolated system, the entropy keeps changing in a way that there are no events in which the entropy sort of doesn't reduce in time? So this problem was posed by Loschmidt to Boltzmann, and he gave a lot of trouble to Boltzmann during when the Boltzmann's theory were developed. So he argued, so there is an incompatibility. So what is a conflict? He says there appears to be a conflict here. Newton's law versus thermodynamics. Newton's law says, I don't recognize time at all. It is just a parameter which goes, I can set the initial conditions, go ahead and come back again if I start from the right conditions. And thermodynamics says, no, if you let all the particles go, put in one corner and let it will go in only one direction. Have any of you seen a gas filled the entire volume and the next moment it goes to the corner, all the particles go to one corner? You never see that. It is all the particles going to one corner is a crazy event in thermodynamics, which has very low probability. So it's a conflict. So how is it possible? This is a question. So is it that one of them is wrong? No way. Newton's law is built. I mean, it's everything. For classical world, Newton's law is everything. And for thermodynamics, of course, it's everything. Why? Because thermodynamics explains what is a solid. Equilibrium thermodynamics explains what is a solid, what is a gas, what is a liquid. It also explains how a solid becomes gas, how a liquid becomes solid. Everything it explains. Okay, but in each phase there are no structures, there are no patterns. If you take a liquid, every portion of a liquid is same as every other portion. There are no patterns, no structure. If you take a solid, every small portion of a solid is same as every other portion, no structure. Gas, no structure. So no structure in the macroscopic sense in equilibrium thermodynamics, but it explains a lot of things that we know. Newton's law are correct. If both of them are correct, how do you explain this unusual behavior of entropy always increasing, whereas the individual particles which are constituently making the system can go back and forth in time? So this is a very interesting question. So this is where the equilibrium part sort of stops in the discussion. Okay. So I'll come to this in a moment. So this is called equilibrium statistical mechanics or equilibrium thermodynamics. Now, when a system is not isolated, meaning if you're going to give energy to the system or you take out energy from the system, for example, if you take water and put it on a stove and try to heat it to make a cup of tea. Most of the young people today probably don't know how to make a cup of tea, I presume. But if you go to the lab, you could probably turn on, take a liquid in a jar and heat it up, and you will see that you are now taking an isolated system, water in a jug. That's equilibrium statistical mechanics. That's described by equilibrium statistical mechanics or equilibrium thermodynamics. Now, if you heat it, now you are putting heat to the system. So you're putting heat or taking out of the heat, then it is called non-equilibrium system. You are driving it, so it's called driven system. In this example, it is not dissipative, but yes. So this is an example of a not isolated system. When the system becomes no more isolated, we have to describe it using methods of non-equilibrium statistical mechanics. So most systems that we know, in fact everything that we know, are systems which are non-equilibrium systems, which are not at equilibrium, which may be steady but not at equilibrium. You are always putting energy into the system, taking out energy of the system, and these systems exhibit structure formation. So equilibrium systems, many body systems don't exhibit any structure. Non-equilibrium systems exhibit structure. So example, molecular motors. When you eat, the energy that is broken down and it's given into muscle. So biomolecular motors, living cells. A cell has a boundary, it takes energy, gives back energy. Organisms, ecosystems, even turbulent fluids, turbulent plasmas, energy goes into it, comes back out of it. Climate systems, crystals growing, snow avalanches, earthquakes, cooling cup of coffee, stars, supernovae, everything that you know is a non-equilibrium driven dissipative system. It's an example of that. Okay, so what are the common features of non-equilibrium system? As I've shown here, common features are they import energy or export energy depending on the situation. They import matter from the surrounding or export matter in the surrounding. But a very important thing is they import matter in a low entropy form and export matter in a high entropy form. I know it's a little loaded, but don't take it seriously. I mean, we'll come back to that later. Okay, so non-equilibrium systems, meaning many particles put together and they are either given energy or take energy taken out of them, and particles can be given or taken out. These are called non-isolated or open driven systems, and these such objects are known to exhibit patterns. All the patterns, all the structures I showed you are examples of that. So here is a very interesting take. So equilibrium systems are static, structureless, lifeless. Okay. Equilibrium many body systems. Non-equilibrium systems are alive, and Schrödinger in a 1932 book suggested that it may explain life itself if properly understood. So I want to sort of take you to a quick discussion. In 1993, there's a very big breakthrough in non-equilibrium statistical mechanics. So young people in the crowd should really read a couple of these papers. That it shows, this paper discovered a connection between second law of thermodynamics and non-equilibrium systems. And this connection is called a fluctuation theorem. It's a very fancy name. I think I have a typo in fluctuation. So FLUCTUATION, fluctuation theorem. So this is a very interesting idea, and one of my students recently wrote a paper on this. If some of you are interested, we can sort of come back to that. So now let me take you, so this is a general description about where you can expect no structure and where you can expect beautiful structure. Okay, so I'm going to sort of take you now quickly through a description of how to understand these systems in a little more detailed way. Rekha madam, should I go ahead?
Sir, yes, you can go ahead.
Okay, okay. So,
Hello, we will take all the comments or questions in the end of the lecture.
No problem. No, I didn't know the structure. Yeah, thank you very much.
That is better because then it doesn't disturb.
No problem.
Yeah,
no problem. No problem. Perfectly okay. All right. So I'm going to now quickly sort of humor you with some really simple things. Okay, but you should sort of try and follow it through. So on the top, you see, on the left hand side, there are two bulbs connected through a pipe, and I'm calling it an initial condition. There are blue colored atoms kept inside at certain temperature, and there is a mouth to it which I'm now kept closed. Now when I open it in the bottom figure, those blue colored atoms would randomly collide and find a way and get through the tunnel and fill up on both sides. Okay, so this will happen if you put either one type of particles on one side, or if it will also happen if you put all the blue colored particles on one side and all the red or whatever color it is, magenta color particles on one side, before you allow the tap to open. And when you open it after a long time, key thing is, after a long time, everything will get mixed and it will attain a state of uniformity. So if you wait for long enough time and leave an isolated system, it will fill up the entire space. So the most likely state in an equilibrium many-body system, this is an example of an equilibrium isolated many-body system, but it fills up everything. We can understand this mathematically, that if you wait for long enough time, all densities in the box 1 and box 2 will be identical or more or less identical, give and take small variations. This is one case. Look at the figure I am showing with a but below. This is another case. Most of you must have realized this. If you put rice, uncooked rice, and peas, matar, okay, together in a pipe, in a tube like this, and mix it, that is the initial state. Okay. Now, interestingly, if you keep turning this tube around at certain rotation, let's say 15 rotations per minute for a few hours, you'll see that the rice and the peas will get beautifully separated, and it will form a pattern like you see on the right hand side. So here it is very strange. On the top, where we had put two different colored gas separately and let it go, it all mixed up because it was an isolated, undriven, non-dissipative equilibrium system. Here, what are we doing? We are putting it all in a box, all mixed up, and we are turning it around. And from a uniform state, a structured, a ordered state emerges. If your parents are okay with it, you can do this experiment at home. Okay, and you'll see that this will happen, of course. So if you put a mixture of these blue colored or green and white colored material of slightly different densities, all mixed up, so it's a high entropy state. It's the equilibrium state. You can never see it happening going back. But here is an example where if I turn it around, all these are separating as if it's going to the initial state, ordered state. How is it possible? What is the physics? Is there a designer behind it? No. This is laws of non-equilibrium statistical mechanics driving it. No pattern, no designer is required to understand the design on the right hand side evolved from a design on the left hand side, except you have to turn it at certain RPM. Okay. So this is a very important observation. So I'm going to now tell you in quick mathematics, because I can't help show you some equations for BSc students. The other people in the audience, just humor me and sort of stay with me. So I'm going to sort of describe in the next few slides. Let us say that the figure on the right hand side, if you can see, shows the same experiment we did before. Since the volume is fixed, the density and number of particles are same because I fixed the volume for the problem. So let us say there are, in the left box, there are certain number of particles. I'm calling it N1. And the right box, there are, as of now, in the initial condition, there are no particles. So in mathematics, how will I in simple words explain this? So in English, how do I say this? If I let the intermediate tap to open, then some particles will go to the right. A little later, they will also come back towards into the thing, and again they will go back. So they will go back and forth, but overall, the left and the right will get uniformly filled. I want to understand this mathematically. Okay, that's an experiment. I want to say it in more technical terms. How do I put this in mathematics? So let me call N1 as the number of particles in the left box, and N2 as the number of particles in the right box. Okay, so if I focus only on the left box counting will change with time. It will become some number now and some number now, whenever there are particles going out of the box. So I have put on the right hand side whenever the container loses particles, so I put a minus n1 on the right hand side, because minus representing loss of the particles in that container. So when I stare at the left container, I will have particles going out of this, so therefore it's minus n1, right? And naturally it will go to the left container, so it's n2 is put in the plus sign. So whenever there is a increase in the particles in the right container, it has to come from the left container. So that is why it is called n2 minus n1 on the right hand side. So any variation you will see in the number of particles in the left hand side box is due to particles going out of the left hand side box and filling into the right hand side box, and particles coming back from the right hand side box into the left hand side box. So whenever particles come back, it is with a plus sign. Whenever particles go from the box, it is with a minus sign. Similarly, if I go to the second box, same story. Whenever any change happens in the number of particles in the right box, it may be due to particles sort of coming from the left box or leaving the right box. So it is now n1 minus n2. Very simple in English, pure English description. So now I can imagine, instead of having two containers, I can imagine three containers connected. And let us pick up the central container. Then the central container will have particles. If I stare at the central container, consisting of now three containers in line, and let us call them I equal to 1, 2, 3. Let us look at the central container. The central container therefore can have particles numbers changing, because particles are coming from the third container, right? And particles are coming from the first container. So there is an n3 and n1 with plus sign. And in each case, central container. So it's minus n2 minus n2. So whenever particle leaves the container, you have to put a minus sign with the container index. Whenever particles come from a container, from whichever container it comes, you put a plus sign and the numbering of the container. That is it. So now I have three containers aligned, and I'm looking at the central container, and this is the equation, it describes it. So I've just rearranged a little bit the signs to make life a little easy. So I can now generalize this. I can put, instead of three containers, I can put instead of three containers, I can put several containers, 4, 5, 6, and write down a similar equation for each one of them. And if I do that, and if I number the containers moving along in the, let's say in the x direction as I equal to 1 is first container, I equal to 2 is on the right side, I equal to 3 is on the further right. So I is like an index which is showing space variation. Then I can write down for any ith container an equation like this, which is exactly the generalization of this previous equation. Then what happens? If you look at it, and if you look at the, don't get worried about the mathematical steps here. Most of you know that in differential calculus, the right hand side that you are seeing here, ni plus 1 plus ni minus 1 minus 2 ni, is simply a second order expression for second order differentiation. So what I have got now is, if I generalize this, I have got, look at the last expression, del n del t is equal to d del square n del x square. So basically says a diffusion equation. So particles are diffusing back and forth in a one dimension, and you can easily construct this from a very simple idea of collecting particles and giving back particles. Look, in space, therefore it is second derivative, and in time it's first derivative, and there is a lot of meaning to that. And the coefficient is called a diffusion constant. Most of you must have studied this equation somewhere or other. If not, it doesn't matter. It's not very, very important. It's just important to understand the spirit behind it. Okay. So this is called a diffusion equation. You can show that if you wait long enough, what happens to, let me go back to this country. If you wait long enough, the lower figure on the right hand side shows that if n1 is the density of the left container and n2 is the density of the right container, it shows that after a long time, n1 and n2 are more or less identical. So n1 minus n2 becomes 0, right? That's what it says. There is no difference between the two densities after a long time. So you can actually simply demonstrate it here. So let me go back. So you can actually solve the equation mathematically. So I don't want to bother you with that. Look at the last step. It shows that the n1 minus n2 is a negative exponential function of time. And if you wait for long enough time, meaning t goes to very large values, n1 minus n2 goes to 0. Very simple. So there are no, n1 and n2 are different. You can think of some structure, but there is no structure. So in an equilibrium system, when you are connecting systems, isolated systems, and waiting for long enough time, no pattern happens. That's the take-home message. So this is a diffusion system. Okay, this is a diffusing case. So now I'm going to describe to you a system called reacting cases. I'll tell you what they are. Tell me something. Most of you, when somebody tells you something, you react to it, right? If somebody tells you that you are such a good boy or a girl, then naturally you will say, "Oh, thank you." You have a smile on your face. You immediately react to that, right? Similarly, this happens in several walks of life. For example, in chemistry, you put a nascent hydrogen or a nascent oxygen and expose it to atmosphere, immediately it will react. It will become something else. It will immediately give something, take something. Okay? It's called reaction. Okay, so these reacting systems are very interesting, and why I am describing it, I'll tell you in a minute. But this is what I mean by systems which are reacting. Okay, so here is an example of a reacting system. See, I've started using differential equations to explain. Previously, there was only one variable called n in my equation. See this equation? I have only diffusion equation has only one n. Now I'm going to talk of reaction, so I should have two types of media. So I'm going to use symbols to explain it to you. So imagine that there's a population of mice, chuha, okay, and owls, ullu. You can think of my face when you say it is very easy to sort of recognize. And chuha means chuha, you know that, right? So I'm going to use a symbol C for chuha and U for ullu. So this is an example where you know that a mice gets eaten by owls, right? So this is an example, and when a is available, it's eaten. It's a reaction. It's a reaction system. Okay? So you can show, like I did before, that the solution for this equation, these are all two coupled equations. In differential equations, they're called coupled equations, because what is happening to C, chuha, is getting affected by the concentration of chuha on the right hand side and the concentration of ullu. Why? Because a chuha gets eaten by ullu. So if there is a ullu population, the population of chuha will reduce. So that's why there is a minus u on that end. Okay, the first equation. Similarly, ullu is there. Okay, I will come to that in a little later, how we can explain it. So here it is. So if you wait for long enough time, you can, the mathematical solution is shown below in the bullet here, in the third bullet here. You can show that they are exponentially damping solutions, which basically means if you take t to infinity, both c and u will go to 0. What does this mean? It means starting from some population of each, ullu and chuha, the ullu will eat chuha. So after a while, all chuha is eaten, so C is 0. But then ullu will starve to death, so U is 0. So both at a long time, both ullu and chuha will go to 0 values. Okay, so this is a model of a reacting system where there is no pattern. Everything goes to 0 at infinity. What are we searching for? After a long time, we need something remaining for this to happen. So diffusion produces in itself nothing at infinity. Reaction in itself produces nothing at infinity. Can I find out a way of producing interesting non-trivial solutions by putting these two together? That's the question. So these are called reaction diffusion systems. And this is a very hot topic in today's research work. It has been there for a while, but it's still hot. Okay? So as time increases, meaning we are going towards an equilibrium, only diffusion spreads things out in very thin, nothing happens. Okay? No pattern. So it's structureless, patternless, or death. Okay? Only reaction, nothing happens. We saw this example. So can we put these two things together and somehow form a pattern? The answer is yes. Individually, reaction does nothing, diffusion does nothing at late times, but if you put them together, a reaction diffusion system, and if you cleverly choose certain parameters, you will see incredible things happening. I'll just show you an example. We'll go back to the Chua problem. So I live in a place called Ahmedabad. Okay, I live in Ahmedabad, but I work in Gandhinagar, and these two are separated by a river called Sabarmati. Okay, and now I have an additional parameter for saying where the Chua is. So now let us consider some population of mice, Chua. And where is it? It is in Ahmedabad, then I'll call it C sub A. And if it is in Gandhinagar, I'll call it C sub G. Okay. Same for Ullu. If it is in Ahmedabad, I'll say U sub A. And if it is Gandhinagar, I'll say it's U sub G. And they are spread all over, more or less, let's say uniformly to begin with. Remember that the A and the G regions are separated by Sabarmati river. Okay. So except in Harry Potter movies, Chuas can't fly. Okay. But Ullus can make a long jump or a small flights. So they can really once in a while cross the river more often. Okay. So in terms of diffusion constant, Ullu has more diffusion, a kind of diffusion if you can't think of it, coefficient than Chuha. Okay, and they remember now the whole thing is spread on both sides of the river uniformly, Chua and Ullu population, but the Ullu can cross one side, the Chua cannot cross. Why? Because of the nature of diffusion coefficient that I have given. Okay, this is very clear in this example. So if you now think of it, so two reacting systems separately will do nothing, they will die. Will produce a stable, boring solution. Two diffusing systems separately will do nothing. We have seen it before. But if you put the reactive and diffusing system together and choose the diffusion coefficient cleverly, then in the end of the day, most Chuas would remain on one side. Ullus in their flight to find Chuas will try to take a flight, go on the other side. They will finish stuff on the other side of the river. And there will be a lot of Ullus on the other side and more Chuas on the left hand side. So you can see that there is a pattern formed. So pattern generation is possible in a reaction diffusion system. On left side you have all Chuas, at least for a short while. And on the right side you have all Ullus. And you can see a pattern and there is a river Sabarmati in the middle. Okay, so the river Sabarmati here is some kind of a boundary which sets up certain spatial structure, and the diffusion coefficient differently brings in this pattern, and you can mathematically show this. Okay, it's been shown by other researchers. So who proposed this idea? This idea was proposed by a genius called Alan Turing, and before him there was a guy called a chemist called Belousov in Russia. He said he observed oscillating chemical reactions in his experiments. But Turing, he lived for a very short while, Alan Turing, suggested that a simple interplay of diffusion and reaction is responsible for complicated biological patterns. That's what he said. So Alan Turing was a major force in cracking German Enigma code in World War II. So he is regarded as father of cryptology. Alan Turing also proposed a test to differentiate between human and artificial intelligence. So many people regard him as father of AI, artificial intelligence. Alan Turing is also considered the father of modern computer science because he was very good at algorithms and he developed a lot of new ideas. And he's also considered as a founding father of theoretical biology and what is a subject called morphogenesis. So a total new area. So it's a very big, very great person. And he lived for a very short while. He lived for 43 years only. He did a lot of historical unfortunate things. Okay. Now, don't look at this. So he proposed in his paper, look at the top red line, that a system of chemicals which is stable in the absence of diffusion would become unstable in the presence of diffusion. This is what he demonstrated. It's a diffusion-induced pattern in a reacting diffusing system. It's an amazing discovery, and he produced lots of stuff. So I think I'm already hitting a limit. So I'll sort of jump to I'll jump a couple of slides. Rekha madam, you will allow me to jump a few slides, I guess, right? Because I'm seeing that the clock is already showing 4:59. So I'm going to sort of describe this idea of Turing patterns. So in 1953, like I said, if you have a reacting chemical and if you allow it to diffuse in certain way, then Turing proposed that it will form patterns. So on the left hand side, reacting chemicals are allowed to diffuse in certain way, and you can see on the right hand side there are patterns. These patterns that you see are not from experiments on biological systems or from anything. It is a result of computer simulation. If you use the differential equations that I described before and set up coefficients, you can generate these patterns, beautiful patterns. And these patterns are generated from simple reacting diffusion system as proposed by Alan Turing. Okay, so let me go back to a few slides, actually the very first slide. So in this figure, if you can see the figures, the top figure, the left side of the top figure, there are two conches on every top row. So you can see that the left one is a real shell, the right one is a computer simulation of reaction diffusion systems. It's exactly identical. Similarly, in the top middle figure, the left one is a real shell, right is a computer simulation. Similarly, on the left top right one, top row, right hand side, you have left hand side of the figure is real figure, right hand side is a computer simulation of a reaction diffusion system. In the bottom row, you will see that there is a fish and an eye, and the right is close to the eye, that's a computer simulation of reaction diffusion systems. So you can same on the remaining figure. So you can see that these systems can produce incredible structures because they are driven dissipative systems, many body systems, not at equilibrium. Okay, so let me go to the. I don't know if I have time, but I'll just quickly. So this is for, yeah. So this is for. Can I take a few more minutes, or should I stop here?
Sure,
okay.
Please go ahead.
Thank you. So those are for static patterns, okay? Patterns which are formed in time and remain. But then we also spoke about patterns like school of fish, like people moving in a crowd, like flying objects. So how do you sort of work that out? So can naturally formed patterns be understood using physics models, where the patterns themselves are dynamic patterns? Yes, they can be. So, for example, if you see this picture, streets get crowded by people, and then automatically they form lanes. Okay? So the top two figures show that most people want to go on the left from one side are coming on one side and the other side, and they're forming a pattern. Similarly, at the right hand side, there is another example where all the people are forming lanes automatically so that they can move easily. So if you have a boundary and if you have a drive, like a policeman standing and showing a danda, in Siddhivinayak temple, automatically lines form, driven dissipative many body systems. So can you model them? Yes, you can model them. So this kind of modeling depends on number of things. What is the density of the crowd? What is the mood? What is the interaction range of the crowd? For example, what is the range if people are pelting stones at each other? So they not only affect the people nearby, they also affect people far away, the range of interaction. Okay? And what is the restriction or how restricted they are to move around? So these things set up. The nature of the laning depends on the density, the interaction range, and what is the forcing that you see. What is the policeman doing, kind of thing. Okay, so I'm going to show you a computer simulation of one of our postdocs, who she used a bunch of particles and then enforced. They are reacting. They are talking to each other through some interaction potential on a two-dimensional XY. Horizontal is X in each box, vertical is Y, and there are two types of particles, like in the example before, and they are interacting through each other. And you will see that if some parameter is changed, I am running all the movies. You'll see that as some parameters are changed, in each box there is something changed. Okay, so there is a policeman. There is suddenly you will see a rapid movement where the particles are in equilibrium thermodynamics, and I am forcing from outside. As soon as I apply forcing, you will see that lanes are formed. You see the right hand side lower picture. Clearly, the red ones are moving in one line, the black ones are moving in another line, and naturally the top figures have less lanes and bottom figure has more ordered lanes, because you can demonstrate that this is a phase transition. It goes into from an ordered state, from a disordered state. When forcing is applied, suddenly everything goes into ordered states, and depending on certain parameters, lanes are formed or lanes are not formed. So it's an example of patterns being formed, dynamical patterns in driven dissipative systems, many body systems, like it happens in a crowded street. When there is a police wala or something barricading, you form lanes. Why do you form lanes? There is a principle behind it, but it's not fully clear. I also don't know, is there a very unifying principle about these? I don't know. But these are the works which are recently published in some papers, which are examples. These are all things which are not interacting, meaning they are not alive. They are not like bacteria. They are just particles interacting. How do you model live objects? How do I model fish? How do I model bacteria? Okay. So nowadays there is a new area called physics of active matter. Active meaning each particle has an internal force which acts like as if it can sort of move here and there. So it's like physics of many particles putting together, and each particle is active in itself, like a bacteria, like a fish who decides to take a left turn and now suddenly it takes a right turn, again it takes a left turn. Okay? Make a decision. So this is called new area, and it was pioneered by a chap called Vicek. He's a Hungarian physicist, and this is a very important paper in this area, where active particles or self-driven particles, if you can put them together, then he demonstrated that you can develop a lot of intuition to this kind of objects which are flocking. So from his paper, I'm going to show you. These are examples from his paper where a bacteria or something is moving on a surface, and how the top row is the actual experiments, and bottom row is his computer simulations from his paper. You can show that there is a very close similarity. Look at the top C figure and the bottom figure. Identical places there are holes and regions in the top and bottom. Similarly, on identical places there are regions of emptiness. It's amazing similarity between these. And this he modeled using pure physics equations, where the only new thing is that he included something called activity, self-drive, for each particle to model the physics of bacteria. And this is a very hot area today. Statistical mechanics of active matter. Okay, so we recently worked on this area, and we have demonstrated something very unique with one of my PhD students. Is that if you put this active matter in a vessel, and you keep the vessel walls at some temperature, say 40 degrees, but we demonstrated that even if you wait for a long time, these active particles inside this can stay away from 40 degrees. They will never thermalize. They can stay at 30 degrees or even 45 degrees. So the wall temperature and the collection of active particle like bacteria, they can stay at a very different temperature. This is what we discovered recently in an interesting work. This is a computer simulation of this flocking effects, depending on that. It is like a birds that you see in returning sky, where you see that what we have done is to use Wyszczyk's model and do simple simulation, which are called Monte Carlo simulation. I don't think I'll explain it here, but it's like doing a computer simulation. And you can see that as some parameter is changing, the birds are tending to have a flocking and they move together. And this is a physics model, exactly like you see. These patterns can be seen in the sky, depending on the density. So on the top left, it is at certain density, and then the density is changing on the right, and then further right, and it shows very different patterns. So you can see that structure and patterns can be formed very beautifully from basic physics equations if you know how to look at the problem. So I've almost come to the end of my talk. So computer simulations is a very useful idea to understand realistic physics problems. Okay. So exploring physics via computer simulation has become a very powerful tool, and young students should pick up simulations very early in their career. Reasonably simple yet powerful models can be cooked up without any unphysical elements. You don't need a designer. Very important. Okay. You can just use laws of physics to generate it. So statistically large degrees of freedom systems like gases, liquids, stars, galaxies near equilibrium are well understood. I mean, no big deal. There are one or two exceptions. We know phase transitions, we know how water equilibrium comes. Everything in equilibrium is understood. What is not understood is driven systems, which can take energy, give energy, dissipative, large degrees of freedom. They seem to form patterns and structures without invoking a designer at the basis of life itself. So is there an entropic principle to understand this? Is there a more nice way of understanding this? So Alan Turing's reaction diffusion system and its variants explain several of these aspects of near stationary patterns. And Weishaupt-like model of self-driven systems explain these dynamic patterns. So my curiosity is it possible to understand origin of life using principles of physics alone? And there are other philosophical questions. I basically am a dreamer, so there are all kinds of questions come. So what is the physics of, for example, origin of consciousness? Can we understand that? So there are other questions, philosophical questions. For young minds, it might be very boring, but some seniors in the audience, it might be interesting. Is consciousness an illusion resulting out of collective behavior of many body systems? So these are very fundamental questions. These are at the root of our being, and it is waiting to be addressed by you, young students. Okay. So these are some of the related publications, and I think I'll stop here. Sorry, I took 7 minutes more. I've come to the end of my discussion.
Yeah. I will request.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will request Kiran sir to please take questions from the comment box. Kiran sir, are you? Hello. Dr. Kiran? Okay. Hello. Yeah, I think I will take the chat box because I think Kiran sir is... Kiran sir, can you unmute your audio and please take the questions from the chat box, or... Okay. So let me just see if there are questions in the chat box. There are many compliments, of course. The talk is nice and very informative, etc. There was Dr. Vijay Singh, President, All India President of IAPT. He has thanked you for such a lucid and far-reaching presentation.
Thank you.
Yeah. There is one question from Rajendra Mori. He says, he asked, sir, can we compare statistical structures and patterns, chaos and unpredictability, or whether there are separate phenomena?
Yeah, so that's actually a very important question. So the answer is a very simple answer is I don't know, but there is a little more better answer than that. Is that many body systems are required to form patterns of the kind that I discussed. But in chaotic dynamical systems, because of the nature of the interaction potential, even in very small degrees of freedom, you get intricate physics problems. So there are large number of people who are investigating this idea. If I take a chaotic system which is chaotic at small degrees of freedom, as I increase the degree of freedom, what would happen to it? So there are people working on this area, and I'm sure there is an impact on what is the role of chaos in pattern formation, and that's what he's asking basically. What is the role of chaos in pattern forming? I think it must have very important consequences, but I have not worked in that area. But it's a very important question to address.
Yeah, very. Okay. There is question from Tushar Pandit.
Mm-hmm.
Can you point out more about the Moire pattern from physics tree?
Yeah.
Moire pattern. I think it is a separate branch of study, Moire pattern.
I'm not aware of it, Tushar Panditji, but I would like to learn and come back to you maybe whenever I have time.
Yeah,
I have not worked in those areas.
Yeah, actually, when you suppose you have a two graph papers like structure and you keep one on the other, one on each other, and just move in different angles, you see that there are different pattern forms, and
Yeah,
they are
more they are more mathematical patterns, and these are more physics.
So basically, they are Moire patterns, I suppose. Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Neeta Srivastav, madam, is asking, sir, can we predict the shape of a dynamic system like moving birds in large numbers?
Yes, exactly. So the movie that I showed you, if you can still see the screen, these movies are exactly like a bunch of birds which are flocking together, and these are modeled by simple physics equations. Okay, the only difference is that they are talking to each other in a very simple way. I can explain in a very simple way. Imagine that you can see the V shapes in the sky. So whenever birds return to their homes, you will see that there are interesting structures forming. So one of the reasons is that the birds which are moving together, all they do is they only talk to the next neighbor on both sides, and they just calculate the number of neighbors to their left and right and decide their speed according to that, and automatically the V patterns form from the calculation. Yes, so these are in some sense simple-minded but not trivial, non-trivial models of flocking of birds.
No. So there are some questions on YouTube also.
Yeah.
Okay. There is a question that we have this set of differential equations called Lotka-Volterra equations, which also model play situation and gives periodic solution. So can we compare this model and reaction diffusion model?
Yeah, but they are fundamentally different systems. Yes, one can in principle compare them, but you need more components added to it to bring into the physics of reaction diffusion. In principle, yes.
Yeah, there is another question by Dr. Madhuri Thakur Desai. How is Ilya Prigogin's work related to this?
Your voice interrupted.
how is Ilya
Hello?
Prigogin's work related to this?
Okay.
It is Ilya
Okay.
Hello.
Prigozhin. Yeah,
Ilya
Ilya Prigozhin.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ilya Prigozhin is a gentleman who got his Nobel Prize in Physics in Chemistry in 1977. He is one of the founding fathers of non-equilibrium statistical mechanics. So he prescribed several governing principles in this area, and it is all directly connected to his work. The part which is active matter may not be directly connected to his work, but the other areas are connected to his work.
Yeah, so there is one more question on chat box. Can patterns be applicable to humans, living beings, in a physics applicative way?
Sorry, what is the last part? Is the patterns applicable to?
You have to interpret the question. Can patterns be applicable
Yeah.
to humans / living beings in a physics applicative
Yeah.
way?
Okay. Yeah. In my understanding, yes, it very much. So that is what is the previous graph was all about.
Yeah.
So
I have one small question.
this, yeah.
What was
Yeah.
the forcing? What was the forcing in your system, your simulation?
What was the what? Sorry. Forcing.
Forcing term?
Yeah. So
Yes.
in this case, these are individual plus and minus charge particles. So the black one, let's say, is plus, and the red one is minus. They are in a periodic system, meaning particles which go from one side will come back from the other side in both directions. So it's mimicking a very large system. And then when I apply an external electric field in the y direction, so apply external electric field in the y direction and increase it from the top figure, right figure, and beyond a certain value of the forcing, the lanes start forming. Though the transition is a continuous transition, it is not sudden. You can see, if you will see very thin patterns evolving all the time. But the sudden big pattern, which is half the system size pattern, starts evolving after a certain value of electric field. So my forcing is external electric field in one direction. People have studied this in electrolytes and also have studied this in simple ferroelectric liquids in experiments also. So something very similar happens there also.
Yeah. There are some people raising hands.
Okay.
We will request them to ask the questions in the chat box.
Okay.
Yeah, I have already asked them to put the questions in a chat box.
Okay.
There is one, can you read what the question has come from Keshava Rao?
Yes. Okay, before that, there is one question again you have to interpret. Can this phenomena be harmonically and unharmonically related?
I don't understand the question. Can the phenomena be
harmonically and unharmonically related?
I am not sure if I understand it. Maybe one way of saying it from my point is that if the particles are interacting through a harmonic potential or an anharmonic potential, is that the question? The answer is very much yes. You can write down model equations, and a range of interactions produce this kind of patterns and phenomena. I don't know if I've answered the question.
One more question.
Yeah.
We'll wait for the comment in the chat box.
Yeah.
Can with this model migrant workers are related? Again, you have to interpret. Can with model migrant workers are related to COVID? Maybe some
Okay.
migration of migrant workers.
Yeah. Of course. So, see, transport, like we discussed, is a very important component of reaction. See, this is a reaction diffusion system, migration of workers, and the spread of COVID or suppression of COVID. So it's an exact example of what is happening here presently. So if you suppress the transport in certain way or decouple this reaction and diffusion, one of them will die. as long as you don't decouple them by either creating a barrier for the virus or by allowing people not to interact, it will keep sustaining. So the important take-home message is the opposite of what is the thesis of the talk, is that go from reaction diffusion to either reaction or diffusion system to stay alive. Suppress.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is one more question on YouTube by Dr. Madhavi Thakur Desai. Again, why the particles do not attain wall temperature of 40 degrees?
In the active matter system? Yeah. That's actually a very good question. That's a very good question. The Dr. Madhvi should, if she
she's a senior faculty member in Birla College.
Is interested she should contact also. Okay. Professor Madhvi, thank you for the question. So the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the fifth reference here is a recent paper which has come up, and it tries to answer this question. I'll try to put it in a simple way. So we have used a model called a Brownian model, which many of us are familiar with. So, and also what is called as a molecular dynamics model. We combine these two ideas together and we have made what is called as a Brownian molecular dynamics simulation. It basically says you have a heat bath and particles are interacting through certain potential, and they also have activity as a switch, meaning self-drive as a switch. So we have demonstrated that if you switch off the self-drive, then in a very short time, the temperature of the particles and the temperature of the heat bath are identical in exponentially fast time, which is expected. The moment you turn on the activity and increase the activity strength, the temperature of the active particles tends to become separate from the bath. The reason we have shown is simply the kinetic energy which comes from the activity itself. Activity is modeled in certain way. So it is simply saying that the self-propulsion of the particles allows it to attain a new equilibrium. Depending on the parameters, this equilibrium can be separate from the thermal equilibrium in the background. It's a real shocking thing, because imagine that you are trying to measure in some naive way, you are trying to measure the temperature of your body, which is not well for some reason. And we always think of the temperature of the body and the temperature of the active medium, which is are same. But we are showing that sometimes this may not be true. It's a little weird, but it is very clearly demonstrated, and the asymptotic results very clearly show that if you take the activity to zero, you continuously go and connect to the background temperature. So the results are not artifact of computer simulations or the model. It seems to be real, and it is due to the self-driven force which is there between bacteria.
Yes, I think I don't see any more question. I think we have considered all questions. So thank you, Ganesh, for this wonderful talk.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Rekha Madam will take over the control, please.
Actually, on behalf of IAPT now, I will be speaking. In the beginning, I spoke on behalf of Department of Physics as well. Thank you, Professor Ganesh, for such a wonderful talk. I never imagined that these patterns have such a good application from physics that we are learning actually. And I like that example which you gave to explain the concept of diffusion coefficient, that Chuha to Ullu. I think that was really wonderful, and I think it could be a really very easiest way to understand why that concept of coefficient has come there, and entirely the whole diffusion things has come. So I think students must have got some kind of idea that there is a lot of potential to do a lot of work in this particular field, where what you see around, what patterns you see around, everything can be applied by the laws of physics, whatever they learn in their classrooms. So I wish to thank you sincerely on behalf of Mumbai Regional Council IAPT, as well as Department of Physics, RJ College Autonomous, and I hope that your association with RJ College will continue as before. You are always there for us whenever we want your help. You have always extended that, and I solicit the similar cooperation and hand from you.
Absolutely,
Uh,
absolutely.
yeah, I take the opportunity to thank some people here on this platform. Basically, my college, RJ College, our principal, Dr. Himanshu Davda, our academic director, Dr. Usha Mukundan, both of them are very supportive to us all the time, and their with the support they extend here. Our host, Mr. Devi Prasad Shetty, of course, is a pillar of all technical support. At the same time, the technical aspects handled by my colleagues, Dr. Kiran Kolvankar, Dr. Devraj Pawar, Professor Sandeep Hinge, all these people have worked a lot to get this presentation done very smoothly, because when we are doing online things, people may not must be aware that there are a lot of problems technically here that we
I can imagine. Yeah.
yes, and with our experiences, I think this whole team is working all behind the whole thing, and I wish to thank each one of them. As at the same time,
Absolutely.
my department colleagues, our colleagues in the college, also the people member from the IAPT, and all the participants who have joined for today's lecture. I wish to thank all of them and be connected to us, because this is a lecture series we are conducting twice a week. So let me announce the schedule. The next lecture is going to be on Thursday by Dr. Sitabhra Sinha from Institute of Mathematical Sciences, Chennai, and he is going to talk on analysis and statistics, etc. And he's going to touch on the COVID analysis as well, and he's doing a wonderful job at the mathematical analysis front. So please join us at 4 o'clock again on Thursday to
Rekha
have.
madam, can I
Yes,
have a word in between? Is it okay?
yes, sure, yes,
Just 1 minute.
yes,
So I would actually like to thank all of you, especially yourself, Kiran, and the head of the department and your principal. It's a wonderful opportunity in these boring times to be able to put together a talk and talk to you all. More importantly, I really enjoy talking to young people, young students, and this has gave me a great opportunity. I thank you for the same.
yeah. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you,
It was a
Dr. Ganesh, and thank you, Rekha Madam, for bringing really good speakers. I wish our students can see it repeatedly on the YouTube also. Sir,
yes.
thank you very much. Have a nice evening.
Actually, I thank Dr. Kiran Kolvankar for actually establishing this contact, and he is really a good resource for us to, arrange such kind of series. And all the
It's wonderful.
executive members of IAPT also. Once again, I thank you everyone, all participants.
Thank you,
Just
and
join us.
stay safe. Yeah,
Yes, you too. You too. Take care. Stay safe. All of you, all of the participants, and join us
yeah,
with us on Thursday at 4 o'clock.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Thank you.
yeah. Send me the URL, and I'll be happy.
Yes, sure,
Thank you.
definitely, sir. Thank you.
See
Thank you,
you.
Usha madam.
I'm going to leave the meeting. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We are
Thank
waiting.
you.
Devi
Thank
Prasad
you all.
can end the meeting, I think. Yeah.
I'm ending the meeting.
Yes.
हाँ